This year I set myself the goal of going on a dedicated photography trip every month, and without exaggeration I can say that this has completely transformed my photography and made me a far better photographer than I was just a year ago. And as a first bonus tip, if you can, try doing the same. Investing in a trip will elevate your photography more than any gear, technique or editing skill ever could. But I also want to share with you the 5 key lessons I learned this year and how that shaped my approach to photography. My year started with a 9-day trip to Portugal, and if you work as a photographer, you probably understand how hard it is to carve out time for personal projects. For me, this trip was my creative retreat for this year, a chance to focus solely on my photography without any distractions. And unsurprisingly, I had an amazing time and came home with images I truly loved. But what really struck me was the fact that for the first time in years, I had learned new things and in just over a week had become a better photographer. That experience led me to the decision to dedicate one trip each month entirely to photography. So over the course of the year, I realized that there's just no substitute for consistent practice. It doesn't matter how much gear you buy, how many photographers you study, or how many YouTube tutorials you watch, nothing will impact your growth as much as going out to shoot regularly. Even if you come home with nothing noteworthy, every outing contributes to your improvement. And it's crucial to deliberately set aside time for photography, whether it's through a dedicated trip or simply an afternoon without any other responsibilities. Trying to fit in shots during a family holiday or between errands rarely leads to meaningful progress. Your mind needs space to fully engage in the process, seeing, capturing and reflecting on what worked and what didn't. And if you only take one thing from this video, let it be this one. Practice is everything. I'll admit I'm still guilty of obsessing over gear and second-guessing my lens choices. But this year I learned that while gear does play a big role for my photography, it's probably not in the way you'd expect. From what I've learned this year, the specs of your camera or even the lenses you use have minimal impact on the way you shoot. I experimented with quite a few different setups and even streamlined my kit significantly and realized that with practice you can make pretty much every setup work. Of course, there are certain scenarios that call for specific tools, but for most cases, the equipment you already have is more than capable enough. However, I found that it is really important if you enjoy the experience of shooting with your camera. In my opinion, this aspect cannot be valued enough and is far more important than the number of megapixels or the latest autofocus capabilities. A camera that feels intuitive and enjoyable to use will inspire you to shoot longer, experiment more and approach scenes with the right mindset. And this will not only elevate your experience, but you are guaranteed to come home with more and better images from a day of shooting. And building on the previous point, I discovered that packing light is also a big factor for success. I really reduced the amount of gear I bring on a trip and it was liberating, not just physically but also mentally. On the one hand, carrying less meant no neck pain from a heavy bag, and on the other hand, fewer worries about the lens choices or missing that perfect shot. I now only bring a small sling bag that fits pretty much everything I need for a day of photography and recording these YouTube videos. I exclusively shot with 3 small primes on all of my trips and never felt like I was missing out on shots. Actually, quite the contrary. By getting to know my focal lengths and how to use them, I rarely had to think about lens choices. Instead, I could focus entirely on finding subjects and creating good compositions. So while it might feel scary to leave behind most of your gear, trust me, it's worth it. Another change I made this year is that I stopped chasing after single standout images. Instead, I focus on creating cohesive photo sets of each location I visit, sets that capture the essence of the place. For me, a well-curated set of images does a much better job of telling a location's story. My goal is to provide viewers with an authentic sense of what it feels like to experience the place with all its details and nuances. For me, this approach just feels more meaningful and lasting. But I'll dive deeper into creating photo sets in my next video, so don't forget to hit subscribe if you don't want to miss that. And my final realization this year is that we often get too caught up on our style or the way we think we should shoot. In the past, I was highly fixated on creating minimal compositions, constantly worrying that anything else might confuse viewers or make my photos harder to understand. I even held myself back from attempting certain shots because I was telling me that that's not your style. But looking back, I'm sure I missed countless photos and opportunities to grow as an artist because of that. So this year, I made a conscious effort to step outside of my comfort zone. I pushed myself to explore scenes I would have previously dismissed and worked on compositions I might have avoided. Now I even find my earlier over simple images a bit dull and much more prefer the complexity and depth of more layered images. So just remember, style isn't something static, it should evolve as you do. So challenge yourself to step outside your usual approach and you might be surprised by the results. That's it for this week. Let me know in the comments what your biggest takeaway from 2024 was, and I'll see you in the next video.